Nigel's playing the wrong game. If he wants to be liked by the mainstream media, he can't be loved by the British people. He's got to pick who he supports. Does he support the establishment, or does he support the ordinary common folk who come out to these marches, come out to these rallies, come out to these demonstrations, festivals, showing their patriotism, showing their pride in their nation, supporting people like Tommy Robinson, Lawrence Fox, myself to some degree, Carl Benjamin, people who are trying to get out there with the British folk, not looking down their noses at them like Nigel Farage is doing.
So has Nigel Farage gone soft? That is the question a lot of folk on the right are asking after a brand new GB News interview where he decided that it was time to go public and say mass deportation is a policy that is being advocated by his close ally, Donald Trump, in the US is no longer feasible. Now, remember, since 2018, more than 130,000 people entered the UK illegally in small boats. But this is what Farage has said on the matter.
It's a political impossibility to deport hundreds of thousands of people. We simply can't do it. At the moment, it's a political impossibility.
But is it your ambition?
No. No, I'm not going to get dragged down the route of mass deportations or anything like that. I mean, people are always going to come and go, and we are a country that's engaged in international trade, and we have relationships around the world through the Commonwealth, etc. But yeah, we have to aim at a balanced migration policy.
But net zero still means hundreds of thousands of people coming into Britain, immigrants coming into Britain. Isn't that too many?
It may well be, but we have to start somewhere.
Trump says in America that he wants mass deportations. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of illegal immigrants are in Britain at the moment. Some estimates say the number could even be in, 1 million plus. So do you support deporting all of those people?
It's impossible to do. Literally impossible to do.
In terms of the atmosphere in Britain, are you concerned that there is a rising level of anti-white hatred?
I'm just concerned about a deeply divided society.
My superstar panel back with me now, Father Calvin Robinson, Alex Armstrong, and Dr. Renee Hoendercamp. Dr. Renee, do you think that Nigel Farage is coming up short here, as a lot of folk on the right are saying, when it comes to rejecting the concept of mass deportations?
Look, I think that just because we're sitting on the right, or that's what we're called now, I'm not sure I ever was on the right, but I think the centre's moved so far left, I'm now far right. But I think just because you're there, you can't expect people to say things that are never going to happen. And I listened to it twice, actually, and I thought, is he just being realistic in the environment that we now find ourselves? And I don't just mean in the UK, I mean globally. Is he right that there is just not the political will to achieve it? And if that's the case, then I think we do need our politicians, our current ones or our future ones, to tell us the truth. But then they have to come up with solutions that are going to address the concerns that people have over infrastructure, integration, which is really not happening anywhere, Islamic terrorism and what threats are out there and how they're going to tackle them. So they need to actually then give us a real idea of exactly what they're going to do to tackle what we're worried about. But if the truth is that mass deportations would be politically impossible, and I think sadly he's right, then I don't condemn him for saying it.
Because I guess the point is now he is realistically thinking about being Prime Minister in 2029. But interestingly, Father Calvin, it was your party, UKIP, where you're now the chief spokesperson, who actually put out that particular video that I played. And Chris Davies, one of our superstar panelists, posted on X in regards to it, having finally got immigration to the top of the political agenda. Nigel Farage has come up short. Sit on the fence and all you get is splinters in your backside. No ambiguity from UKIP. Start the deportations, 10,000 foreign criminals or starters. So do you agree that Farage hasn't gone far enough?
If Nigel Farage is not anti-immigration, what is he? What is the whole purpose of him and his party? It doesn't make any sense to me. It seems insane. The moment he's become a member of the establishment, he has fallen in line with the establishment party line. It's a great shame, because he should be in there. He should be in the Houses of Parliament pushing the message that he's been saying for the last 20 odd years, in that Britain is full to the brim. It's that breaking point. We say this every week, but there aren't enough hospitals, there aren't enough rooms in the classroom, there aren't enough doctors, the resources are stretched, there aren't enough homes. At the same time, knife crime, all-time high. In fact, all crime is rising, especially in our major cities. And we see this as a direct impact of mass illegal immigration. And for him to sit there and say this, oh, it's impossible, politically impossible to deport all the illegal immigrants. What? Where's his political will? He is a politician. It's up to him to have the will to make this change. It's no good saying, oh, well, we can't do it. Well, why? Make it happen, or put forward a policy or a plan to show this is how we can make it happen. And it certainly can be done. Other countries have done it. We can copy models from abroad. If people enter the country illegally, that is a crime. Their first thing they're doing in the United Kingdom is breaking the law. Therefore, they should be deported. Anyone that breaks the law in the United Kingdom, if they're not British, should be deported. And if it's not doable at the moment, we need to get to a place where that is doable, because it's the lives of Brits that are at risk, particularly young British white girls who are being groomed, raped, and sometimes murdered by foreign entities that shouldn't be in the country in the first place. People who have values and cultures that are contradictory to our own. We know the evidence is there, yet nothing is done about it because these weak, yellow-bellied politicians do not have the will to make a change for our good, for all of our good. And it's a great shame that Nigel Farage has become one of them. Shame
well, Alex
on him.
Armstrong, we just saw the Rotherham 7 there, and this week, one of the victims, a woman who was raped and groomed from a shockingly young age by one of those men, was actually banned by the judge from saying that she wanted her perpetrator to be deported back to Pakistan.
Shocking stuff again. I think it just goes back to what we were talking about earlier with the justice system just being rotten to its core. Quite frankly, I think that victim should have said whatever she wanted to. And I think the British public are going to be shocked to hear that she was pretty much just cut down by the judiciary, again showing the two-tier bias in our system, while you've got the victim, one of the criminals' children saying "I love you, Dad," and tutting in the room. If I were the judge, I would have had them banged up for 24 hours for supporting his actions and making that poor victim's life even worse while she was sat in the stand. I just couldn't believe what I was reading and about that case. When it comes to deportations, I tend to agree with Father Robinson. I think we need to be far tougher as a society, but I do believe Nigel Farage's MO is to close the borders. And I think that's where we should start. I do think we need to close down immigration and build a society that's sustainable. I think that there is possibly quite a ploy here from Reform, who are trying to move in on Tory territory. I think the party is trying to maneuver itself into a position where it's more electable, not seen as so outlandish compared to the main political parties, in order for it to garner more of those conservative votes. I think that's what the plan is. Whether that's what Nigel Farage's entire sort of mission objective is, I don't know. I don't believe Nigel is pro immigration, by the way.
But he is saying net zero immigration now, and some argue, well, that's not enough, because that still actually means hundreds of thousands coming in a year. Although personally, I'm much, much more happy with this form of net zero than crazy environmentalism, nut zero, as I call it. But the other issue that sparked a lot of controversy in this interview, a very good interview by Stephen Edgington actually, was the idea of demographic change. And I would say Nigel was trying not to be caught in a trap, but have a look at this moment of the interview, and I'll tell you why it's controversial after.
Do you think that immigration represents a major threat to Britain from a demographic perspective? So in the last 20 years, the white British population has declined from 87% to 74%. Is that a concern of yours?
No, that's not a concern of mine. What is a concern of mine is, in many cases, the lack of integration. We see that writ large by the new kind of politics that's emerging, sectarian voting along religious lines. I never really thought I'd see that in England in my lifetime. I mean, I grew up seeing what it...
Do you think...
Now, Connor Tomlinson, one of our superstar panelists, wrote on X regarding that. It's a concern for young men most inclined to support you, Nigel. England is not just an idea, and new arrivals have no inclination to assimilate. But first, guys, you know this is the best time of year, and girls too. Football is back. We're talking Premier League in the UK and in the US. It's NFL Sundays and college football Saturdays. With that comes the glorious grind of fantasy football lineups, which is where your inner manager comes alive, setting the perfect fantasy roster, screaming at your TV and making last-minute waiver moves that either make you a hero or the guy everyone ridicules in the chat group. Listen, while you're over here making sure your fantasy team is dialed in, don't let your personal grooming become the guy that gets left off the bench. Because let's be honest, no one wants to fumble their grooming routine. And that's where Manscaped's Performance Package 5.0 Ultra comes in, acting as your all-in-one grooming playbook. From keeping things sharp down below with the Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra to take care of those rogue nose and ear hairs with the Weed Whacker 2.0, this is the lineup that will keep you looking and feeling like a champ on and off the field. It will help you feel clean, confident, and ready to dominate your fantasy league. The Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra Groin and Body Hair Trimmer is the franchise player of your grooming roster. With precise trimming capabilities, it's reliable, efficient, and gets the job done without fumbling. Whether it's for date night, a weekend tailgate, or just everyday grooming, this is the tool you want on your squad. No one wants a surprise ear or nose hair making a guest appearance on game day. The Weed Whacker 2.0 handles those details like a pro, keeping you neat and ready to go. No missed tackles in your grooming gang. The Performance Package 5.0 Ultra doesn't stop at grooming essentials. It also comes today with 2 free gifts. The Boxers 2.0 Midnight Bravo and the Shed 2.0 Toiletry Bag. Premium gear to ensure you're always ready for action, whether at home or on the road. So join the over 10 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped and get ready for kickoff by heading over to manscaped.com. Use the code Outspoken today at checkout for 20% off and free shipping. Trust me, you'll be drafting the real MVP of grooming this season. So let me repeat, www.manscaped.com, 20% off and free shipping with the code Outspoken. Stay on top of your grooming gang and be ready for anything the season throws your way. So, Calvin Robinson, what did you make of this? Farage says, look, it's not about demographic change. It's about cultural change.
England is and always has been a predominantly white country. If Nigel Farage can't say that, then again, shame on him. And it should remain a predominantly white country. Britain should remain predominantly British. People can argue for some level of immigration if they like. They can argue for a multi-ethnic society, a multicultural society, but the predominant culture should be British. The predominant race should be English in England. And that's not racist or xenophobic or anything to say. That's just to protect what is and to keep it the same and allow others to come in and integrate if you want to argue that. And for him to sit there and say, well, we've seen sectarian voting along religious lines, we've never had that nonsense. Again, the country was always and has always been Christian. Voting was always and has always been along Christian lines. What he's not wanting to say, what he's not brave enough to say, is that we're seeing a lot of Islamism now. We're seeing Islamists in Parliament. We're seeing people saying vote for Gaza or vote for Islam in order to get into the UK Houses of Parliament. He will not address the elephant in the room, which is Islam. The biggest creator of terror in the West, the biggest creator of terrorist acts in England, in the United Kingdom, and unfortunately, it is the biggest demographic change. And so unless we address it, unless we do something about it, by somewhere between 2030 and 2050, the United Kingdom will be predominantly Islamic, and then it'll be too late. So it's now that we have to have this conversation. And if people like Nigel Farage are not even able to have the conversation, who is? Britain's lost.
Well, Dr. Renee, my assumption about this is that Nigel knows that as it stands, he is under sustained attack by the mainstream media. And I'm not defending this because I always think people should say what they really think. But is he potentially trying to avoid some obvious traps that he know they will batter him with if he goes down a particular line?
Yeah, so I thought it was a really clever answer of his when he was asked whether or not, was he worried about the change in terms of people's skin colour being non-white. And to say no to that for him was the right answer, because you can see the headlines tomorrow had he have said, yes, Nigel worries about skin colour. And in a way, he's right, and so is Calvin. So I really don't care about people's skin colour, as we know. But what I do care about is values and culture. And I think the previous story demonstrated to us part of the problem in the UK in a major way. So those men that were treating young girls like they were sacks of potatoes, because they have a specific worldview from their religion on what women should be and where their place is, did that because of their religion, not because of their skin colour, because of their religion. The fact that one of those men who abused that little girl when she was 11 came to court 22 years later, having set up home in the UK, having a family, etc., still did not speak enough English, that he needed an interpreter in the court, demonstrates the problem that we have. And the problem is twofold. We have no integration of the people that are coming from countries where the religion is Islam. And there is no desire to do so because it is such a cultural difference to ours that there is no meeting of minds. When we had Windrush, all of those people assimilated well, even though we were quite hostile to them at the time, to be fair. But they really did assimilate, and that's how I ended up with the child that I have from a Windrush family, because they were Christians.
Yeah.
And this is the issue. Britain is predominantly a white country. That could change if, it doesn't matter. But what does matter is the culture and the religion that underpins it. And unless we are able to talk out loud about why Islam doesn't fit in with British values or British religious beliefs, and so will change our demographic forever and our lives forever, because as Calvin rightly says, there is a completely different view on how lives should run and how women sit within it, then we are heading for a massive problem. We do need to speak about this. And I felt that Nigel was trying to get at that, but without upsetting too many people tomorrow.
Yeah, and that's the difference, I guess, with Nigel. He is trying to still play within the Westminster ballpark because he knows that the best way to bring change is for him to end up Prime Minister. But Tommy Robinson wasn't happy with this interview either. This interview, my goodness, poor Nigel, actually. Loads of people seem to hate it. So Tommy tweeted, "Here we have Nigel Farage trying to throw me under the bus yet again today. You did actually pump the fake news that the Southport murderer was a Muslim, not me. I actually checked my sources. You're just Tory establishment in a different colour ribbon. You think you're above us. You're not." So I'll show you what Tommy was referring to, and Alex, you can respond off the bat.
And that's as a result of the riots and left and right commentators, Conservatives, Labour, saying that I was inciting the riots, as if somehow, I was linked with the Tommy Robinson wing of politics. And I genuinely believe in my case that what's been said by some national broadcasters literally is insightful. Well, here, it's a whole lot worse than that.
In Britain, we've heard endless talk of the threat from the far right. Do you think that the elites understand that actually the threat from the far left is building and is serious?
No, I don't think they do fully. I think what they do understand, and electorally Labour are now terrified of many of the inner cities. Remember, Wes Streeting only held his seat against, a pro-Gaza candidate by simply a few hundred votes. So I think they're aware of that threat, electoral threat to them, the sort of the sectarianisation of politics. But I don't think they understand some of the real hatreds that are building up on the left towards anybody who expresses even a vaguely conservative view. Now, look, we talk about the threat from the far right. Of course, it exists. We know there are people out there that love violence, but I don't think. I honestly don't believe the far right's very big in Britain. I don't think most of those people out on demonstrations were members of the far right. They were just enraged people who are really, really worried about what's happening in our towns and cities.
We'll get on.
So, Alex Armstrong, the £64,000 question: is Nigel Farage right to distance Reform UK from Tommy Robinson, even though it does mean purging a lot of people from the party who want to support both?
Well, look, I think this is a really complicated question because if you've got to look at it from two angles, the first angle you've got to look at it from, and this is what I assume Nigel Farage and Reform are doing, is how is this going to play in politics and in the media, the mainstream media, who he needs to win over in order to win an election. You can't have the media against you in an election. As we saw, they did everything to try and take him down in the last general election, associating him with Putin and everything else. And so I think he's looking at it from that angle. What would the press say immediately if he said, yes, I support Tommy Robinson? It would be front page. It would be front page news, and the mainstream political parties would use that against him forever. So I think he has to do that. I think the difference is Tommy Robinson does have a divisive brand in the UK, and there are people who don't listen to what Tommy says, who will take things a lot of what he says based on what the mainstream media say, and they will form their opinions based on that. So I think for Nigel Farage and Reform, it is very important that they don't draw a connection between the two. And I think Nigel Farage has openly said multiple times that he does not support Tommy Robinson. So I think this is groundbreaking news. I'd say the party itself is trying to prepare to win a general election. I still believe that the Reform Party should stand for freedom of speech, and whether that means the members can support whoever they want. That's the most important thing Reform can endorse, particularly based off the back of the conversation we've had today. Does Reform believe in freedom of speech? Well, that's a question we'll find out soon enough.
Yeah. I mean, look, it's certainly going well for Reform at the moment. Zia Youssef, the chairman, posted Reform continues to surge. New polling shows us winning 16 seats from scratch in Scotland, and we have not even built our infrastructure yet. So, Calvin, I mean, isn't that the most important thing, that they're not distracted by an issue that the mainstream media would be so desperate to tie them to every single day?
No, not at all. This is the exact opposite of what they should be doing. Nigel Farage wants to be liked. This is a great problem. He wants to be liked. He's never going to be liked. He is divisive. Nigel Farage is divisive just as Tommy Robinson is divisive, right? The problem is, so after we've done here, I'm going to go and talk to Tommy Robinson because I trust Tommy 10 times more than I would trust Nigel Farage, because the difference is Tommy says exactly what he thinks. Nigel Farage, as Dr. Renee has said and as Alex has said, he says what he thinks the media want him to hear. Nigel, that's snaky behavior. I don't trust snakes. I don't trust politicians. Nigel Farage is just a politician at this point. We need people that will say, look, this is where the country is. This is where we want to take the country. And this is how we get there. Not, oh, actually, well, I think this and I can't quite say that. This is impossible. Nigel's playing the wrong game. If he wants to be liked by the mainstream media, he can't be loved by the British people. He's got to pick who he supports. Does he support the establishment, or does he support the ordinary common folk who come out to these marches, come out to these rallies, come out to these demonstrations, festivals, showing their patriotism, showing their pride in their nation, supporting people like Tommy Robinson, Lawrence Fox, myself to some degree, Carl Benjamin, people who are trying to get out there with the British folk, not looking down their noses at them like Nigel Farage is doing. And if Reform get into power based on being wet and liberal, based on being pretty enough for the mainstream media, then they won't make an impact. If they want to change the country for good, they've got to clamp down on illegal immigration, deport foreign criminals. They've got to get tough. And that's what the British people, I believe, want. And that's why if he does that, he'll get in. If he doesn't do that, it doesn't really matter if he gets in or not, because he'll just be the same as the Tories. Tory 2.0. What difference will that make?
Thank you so much for watching Dan Wootton Outspoken. Please do subscribe if you want lots more clips and interviews like that. Plus, if you want to watch our totally uncensored after show, then visit www.outspoken.live.